Welcome both Elana and Billy Hayes to the show this evening. Hello there.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's an honor to have you, both of you. Hi, Billy.
Howdy.
Great to have you on, and thank you for joining us this evening. This is such important information to share. So let's get started here, and let's talk about what you've been up to. Also discussing your book. I know you have the first book, and let's talk a little about the new book you have coming out as well.
Okay, the Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, put out by Feral House, was really a consolidation of everything we know up to now about these covert programs that the news keeps telling us are about geoengineering that may be instituted, when the truth is we've been undergoing a geoengineering, one program after another, really since the Cold War. But this program, this particular one that was born out of Operation Cloverleaf, Project Cloverleaf, is about 15 years old, a little more, 17 now. And so I wanted to just bring together everything that we knew. And my destiny, I like to call it, had it. I actually was friends with Clifford Carnicom, the independent scientist who's done so much work on identifying the Morgellons creature. He and I were close friends. He, his wife, I, and a couple other people, we would meet for breakfast every other week in Santa Fe, New Mexico, up until a few years ago when both I and Clifford and Carol, we all moved to the Pacific Northwest. So I had already been finding out about the relationship between chemtrails and Morgellons, but what I didn't know until I was asked by Adam Parfrey, the publisher at Feral House, if he asked me if I thought I could write a book on chemtrails, and I actually didn't know until I began doing all the research and really reading over some notes I had made about 5 years earlier that they are very, very connected. In fact, I would say that you cannot have one without the other. And that was the thrilling part for me when I realized that not only were both programs, the Chemtrails program and HAARP, which people probably know, but it's the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project up in Gakona, Alaska, is how we've been thinking of it, how the two were interlocked. And that really was the exciting thing for me in the beginning. And then as the book went on, I began to realize that it seemed that they were just putting together an ionized atmosphere. And I remember thinking, I wonder what that ionized atmosphere is going to be used for. And so gradually I discovered 7 agendas, which are all military in nature. And that was with Clifford Carnicom. And I realized that the ionized atmosphere that we're all breathing now is actually it's like a battery. It's constantly charged to some degree for a variety of agendas. And then after I was on Coast to Coast in May, Billy contacted me, and we were able to become friends. I was really grateful for Billy because whereas I'm basically a researcher and a writer, he actually had the hands-on experience of working on many, many towers like the one in Gakona, Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Is there anything you want to add to that, Billy?
No, she's doing fine.
Well, Billy, tell them when you did work on the HAARP up in Gakona. What year was that, and what was it like?
We started our first efforts in setting up. First HAARP was with Gerald Bull, and that was in the late 50s into the 60s. And then after the incident of the earthquake in 1963, the next plausible time was with Mr. Easton. He met up with us at Anchorage, and that was in 1986. and we began the project in 1989.
And how long did it take to finish it, Billy?
Oh, it was endless. Every time we get to one thing, we'd be back in 6 months to do another. It's just been an endless project all the way through. Even today, there are things with HAARP's system going on.
Okay. Now, I was under the impression they actually switched off the array system in Alaska with HAARP. Was that correct or no? Did somebody just take over a new contract?
You're correct. HAARP Kokona is down.
Okay.
But the affiliated sites now have been amended and are now part of the space surveillance system, also known as Space Fence.
Okay.
Yeah, and that has to do with the next book. And that's what I realized is that as Billy began to explain various things, and the publisher had already taken out 2 chapters from the book, saying that it was already overwhelming enough. Those 2 chapters were dedicated to my going through all the cell towers, the NexRads, the Gwen towers, in order to understand how they were going to make what they call the smart grid, which is actually more accurately identified as the space fence, which is exactly the follow-through on Reagan and Cheney and Rumsfeld's the old SDI system, the Strategic Defense Initiative, otherwise known as Star Wars. So this is the culmination now. They needed that ionized atmosphere, and they needed a grid system of various instruments, including lasers and transmitters and things, in order to set up what I call a lockdown grid. And that is where the mind control will come in, will be through plugging our nervous systems into that. And that comes through the heavy metals that are very conductive on a nanoscale that we have all inhaled and which are floating in our bloodstreams and lodged in our tissues. And it is through the conductivity of these heavy metals that our nervous system is plugged in.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. Well, yeah, we're electrical, so we can be hijacked very easily. That's what it boils down to. Right
exactly.
there. Now, you were talking a little bit about the affiliated sites. I'd like a little bit of information insofar as what are the other affiliated sites for HAARP, if you have them.
Yeah, Billy, let's go through some of that, and let's, not just the SBXs, but I'd like you to kind of do draw a picture for people of all the different things that are utilized in order, for example, to move weather systems.
Okay. There were multiple sites all over the world. We engaged with over 250 different sites. Some of them were control sites, some of them were transmitter sites, some of them were receiver sites, some were translator sites. Many of them were no more than relay stations required by NASA and NOAA and weather systems. They were passing all sorts of information back and forth. Mm-hmm. HAARP could not work just as one individual system. It included Superdorn sites. It included all the radio telescope sites. Mm-hmm. All this information was being ganged together in order to make monitor of the results of what the HAARP systems were doing.
Okay, can I ask you real quick, what exactly drives HAARP as a network? What exactly is the driving force behind that? I mean, energetically speaking.
RF.
Radio frequency? Okay.
Radio frequency. Yeah.
And that's ground control? It's not from satellite?
No.
Okay.
It will be.
Okay.
As the new space fence comes into being, it will be more and more beyond the range of just RF. Right. It will be in the range of utilizing new laser systems, new maser systems, mm-hmm. A whole digital classification of tooling that will be part of a total communication network worldwide. It will be a control of all communications via government, via civilian, everything that will be has a digital register
Right.
will be part of the new space program.
Okay, and would you say that could be an artificial intelligence satellite driving system?
It will be.
Okay.
It will be capable of that.
Okay, and it reminds me of a frequency fence. When you describe this, it sounds like a frequency fence.
And that's exactly what it is.
It's just like very disturbing, and yet I know that this is almost like, to me, it sounds like it's almost in motion.
But I think one of the things we need to add in, Billy, is that it's a frequency fence, but what about the pulses? I mean, the pulses to me are the most interesting.
Is that electromagnetic pulse, Elana?
Well, it's more the rate of pulse that is interesting, and they're in hertz.
Okay.
And as you know, we have the Schumann resonance, and this could feasibly change the resonance, the natural resonance of all life on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very serious.
Well, what that corresponds to is almost everything today is a matter of a pulsing signal within your cellular systems. The identification that runs with along with the voice messaging, the data links, is all in pulses. It isn't the frequency that you're looking at. It's a matter that it pulses at certain random rates that they set up. Even today, even wind farms are energetically dispensing electrical pulses of a resonant Schumann frequency, as they term it. Radar, the so-called NAXRAD, they're capable of dispensing, along with their normal radar pulses, they are capable of emitting Schumann frequencies within them too. Your Gwyn towers, the old Gwyn tower systems, are on the comeback because they have gone through this new digital analyst of dispensing pulsed information.
I agree with that for sure.
And it was in actually in Bernard Eastland's patent, in the original, the 1987 patent that I go through in Chapter 2. The interesting thing to me is that cyclotron resonance is the primary way of heating through the transmitter in Gakona, for example. And so it goes up to the ionosphere, and then it kind of twirls and swirls down the magnetic lines of force. And as you know, electric and magnetic are at right angles, and it comes down, and this is the primary way of heating. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Well, Dr. Robert Becker, whose book you probably know, The Body Electric, he also wrote a book called Cross Currents, The Perils of Electropollution, The Promise of Electromedicine. And it's in there that it really strikes a nerve as to what this could mean for huge populations and the frequency, the pulses, because Becker says cyclotron resonance is a mechanism of action that enables very low-strength electromagnetic fields acting in concert with the Earth's geomagnetic field to produce major biological effects by concentrating the energy in the applied field upon specific particles, such as the biologically important ions of sodium, calcium, potassium, and lithium. And then I remembered reading at Clifford Carnicom's site, carnicominstitute.org, that he had actually targeted potassium to figure out if the chemtrail activity and the pulses that he was logging outside his Santa Fe house were connected to our endocrine system. And what he says is that the fifth harmonic of the ELF, the extra low frequency, that has been repeatedly measured over a period of several years by him, corresponds to the cyclotronic resonant frequency of potassium. The fifth harmonic, along with numerous other harmonics, is a regular component of the ELF radiation that is under measurement. And his assertion that the potassium ion is being targeted for, quote, biological interference within people over large regions of the Earth's surface is, as you can imagine, extremely serious, because we need the right balance of all of these elements for health. And later in the book, I talk about what a moneymaker this whole system is, all the way from weather derivatives to Rothschild buying up, I think it's the Weather Channel, and the control over this technology in the ionized atmosphere is very enriching for big pharma and for the medical industry. And that really, to me, is evil. Mm-hmm. That is not only a tragedy, it's an evil.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it just reeks of transhumanism.
As an objective, an objective we're moving into right now. You're absolutely right.
And can we go through a little bit insofar as what kind of effects are going to happen insofar as mass collectives? What do you see transpiring with the deployment of this grid, if they do get away with deploying this frequency-type fence grid? Do you see it as a mass mind control? Do you see it as a DNA thing where it just gets switched off? Or
Billy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that it's going to be a mass communication system that monitors all communications around the world. Military, civilian, business, everything. Anything that is on the digital realm is a matter of being stored for future research. This is what Snowden was giving warning of, was that they were maintaining a library, a reference to what they already have stored.
Right.
And it's everything in this world that's digital. It could be driver's license. It can be car licenses. It can be communications on your cell phone. Everything that is digitized is going to be part of the system.
Right. So that's a data mining and a storage. And what are they going to do with that data? Are they going to deploy it through psychotronic transmission, or what do you think they're going to do with it?
It's a matter of reference.
Okay.
It's a matter of monitoring everything that's going on. Everything.
Yeah, total control. Yeah.
It's a matter of controlling things. Everything is digitally controlled nowadays.
Right.
Your oven is digitally controlled. Your refrigerator is digitally controlled. Your smart meters are digitally controlled. Your computer is a controlling item. These things are part of your life. So any part that is digitally mastered is of their control.
Right. And of course the brain, and you're going into the brain hack and the mind hack as well.
Exactly. Another thing that is pursuant that has came up above all other things is now the production of oil. The so-called fracking intimacy that everybody's worried about, it gets even worse. It works on these pulses that are being generated. These 3, 12, and 20 hertz pulses are now part of the fracking industry. The salts that they utilize now have aluminum sulfates and salts in them and acids that every time there's a pulse that is resonant to what they tune that well to, it winks, it squeezes. So it actually assists in their so-called fracking. Well, when you have fracking, you also have dislodgement of the Earth's mantle.
Right. Yeah, it's just chaos in motion.
Well, it's the latest toy, really, and I mean, this will be remembered as an electromagnetic era, and yet, as you know, ever since the 90s, when I remember Colonel John Alexander was working at Los Alamos National Labs, and he was primary in the development of non-lethals, and so for years we went through that term that the media spun of non-lethals, and slowly realized that you can die from non-lethals, so they can't be that non-lethal. So every time, because we're such a media generated era, it seems that one of the biggest things I concentrate on when I give public talks, like during my book tour during September, I really want to stress to your listeners that we need to, in order to understand such a global system, it's almost like when you hear the term we're $8 trillion in debt. What does that mean? I mean, who can imagine what $8 trillion is? I can't, unless you pare it down to how much money that is per day or per hour or per minute. The same thing with this is a huge global system that operates sort of grid-like through all of these installations that are on military bases, they're on oil rigs, they're on university campuses, they're, I think of Virginia Tech, where Super Darn is, there's one Super Darn there, and then there's 20, 50 more. To understand that, we have to face what the media has done to our minds. Talk about mind control. We've all been subjected to cognitive dissonance. And this cognitive dissonance is such that we like to think of life as pleasant, and we don't like pain, which makes us pretty normal. But because we hide from pain, or maybe we don't have self-confidence in our ability to think. Maybe school was a bad trip. Whatever it is, to me, in order to really contest this electromagnetic era and guide it in the right way that it should go, there's no way we're going to get rid of it, but there are some right ways we could go. We're going to first have to deal with our minds and how we want things in sound bites, and you cannot understand an entire global system in sound bites. You're not going to get it on the news. You're not going to get it in a comic book version of this. And I think of that because I have over 600 footnotes in the book, but I try to write it so that it's not all science, because I'm not a scientist. It's about our planet Earth. It's about the life forms on the planet Earth. It's about the trees dying in California. I mean, there's so much going on that people will be tempted to shut down to some degree and sort of let it slide away through this cognitive dissonance that are really trained by the media to adhere to. And I really want to appeal to your listeners that if I stand for anything, I stand for consciousness. And the more I've learned about this, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you, Solaris, because you're dedicated to knowledge, you're dedicated to your show and to helping people to develop the confidence to understand this world that we have been born into. So I just want to say that even as you're listening to facts and figures, it's that cognitive dissonance that we really need to look at in ourselves so we can dismantle it and be able to learn and then develop the ability to act. Often people will say to me, well, Elana, what should I do? What should I do? Well, yes, reading the book is doing, dismantling your cognitive dissonance is doing. There's so many doings to do to prepare to do something collectively.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Yeah. Well, there's definitely a war on consciousness. And of course, it's to me, I see it as a misuse and abuse of power. I mean, we have a weaponized world right now, and it's out of control. I don't have to tell you also how many people are suffering from electronic harassment or a form of mind control. And I've been through the ringer with synthetic telepathy and covert technology and being hacked as well. So this stuff is real. And people need to be up to speed. And I think you're right. We need to get more clarity. But once again, I think they're getting bombarded with such pollutants and such distortion coming from not only media, but the transmissions that we need to clear that field so we have more clarity. Now, my question to you all is what would you do? What do you suggest that people can do? What precautions can they take to clear that line and to remove some of these, what I call them, running interference, perhaps?
Well, I definitely can respond to that because I've gone so deeply into the Morgellons with Clifford, and I cover it in chapter 8 of the book. Morgellons itself is an interesting disease in the sense that the cross-domain bacteria, which is the actual name Clifford has given it, it has 5 parts to it, and it basically is a genetically engineered hybrid he calls it the cross-domain bacteria because it really spans all three domains of life. It has extraordinary capabilities because it has microprocessors in it. It has sensors in it, all on a nanoscale. It is able to communicate with its brethren in the body. Once it's breathed in, it enters the bloodstream. It's been programmed to eat iron, and it needs the iron for its conductivity. And the fact that it's so conductive indicates that the programmers wanted it to be available to remote programming. Mm-hmm. And it seems that in the people where it has really taken root, I mean, I have them. I have seen them I did the red wine test with Clifford. He drew my blood. I've seen them eating my iron out of my erythrocytes under Clifford's microscope. The fact that I live with these little creatures, just like I live with the flora and fauna in my intestinal tract, this is really how our condition is. And the fact that there's small creatures eating off of large creatures, and we need to really see. I mean, if you study the cross-domain bacteria, you see that it loves electricity. It loves the electromagnetic. A person with lesions will come near their toaster oven, and the little wiry heads poking out of the lesion will go crazy. So what does that say about the fact that we want to live in Wi-Fi environments for our comfort, for our convenience, so our Aunt Mary can call us when she feels like it, so we can talk to each other when I'm coming in on a flight at the airport? What does it say that we've allowed ourselves to be seduced by those who sell the cell phones, those who sell the iPhones, the iPads, on, and put up all these towers wherever they feel like putting them up. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 forbids us to forbid them to put up their towers where they feel like it. So the fact that we live in Wi-Fi environments and then wring our hands over the fact that our health is suffering, I think we need to look at our lifestyles and what we've grown accustomed to. Yes, the transmitters that live, that are 3 miles from me. Yes, those are a problem. But the first problem is what's close to home. It's like the cognitive dissonance, right? There's going to be no large thing we can do until we clean our house. Mm-hmm. And we come to some terms about how we choose to live. Then there's the GMOs. I mean, is everyone eating organic yet? Is it true that our water system is health inducing? Have we had our water tested? Have we been, there are so many small things, you see what I'm getting at, mm-hmm. that I highly, highly recommend to people. That's the beginning of taking responsibility for the era that we have allowed to go to this point. Right. I mean, we're the only ones who allowed it to go to this point. It wasn't our children. It was us.
Right. And it's going fast forward right now. And what I'm seeing is a hybridization of the regular, what we used to have as a quote unquote human, is now becoming a modified hybrid of some kind. And my question would be, what kind of hybrid are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with the transhumanism where these nanos that you're talking about are under intelligent control? So who's doing the remote programming?
Well, to me, I'm not quite clear on your question, but that would be for me, I would see it as the defense contractors, okay, like Raytheon, L3, Lockheed, mm-hmm. And AT&T. The Google. They're all in bed right. together. I'm not going to reach beyond the human at all until I've dealt with the human participants. And they are very, very active in this. I could blame my military, the military in our country. Yes, of course, they're responsible. But Eisenhower really gave us the very cool term that we're all sick of. But really, it still works, except I would add intelligence to it. So the military-industrial intelligence complex They are all working in concert because it's highly profitable, as Naomi Klein said in her book, The Shock Doctrine. Disaster capitalism is going to serve them well as they topple us from the bottom down. They're going to make a lot of profit off of this system that we call HAARP, chemtrails, for want of a better word, because, as you know, HAARP is shut down, the original installation.
Right. Well said. And do you have anything to add over there, Billy?
Nope, she's doing fine.
Okay. Well, it does sound like they're obviously working towards eugenics of some kind. Maybe a mass kill off. What is your impression of that?
No, I wouldn't say a mass kill-off, other than perhaps on the African continent or some developing country somewhere where they're experimenting. I think now they're in an experimental stage. Certainly, I could make a case for, and I do in the book, for the weather, such as Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, the Haitian terrible hurricane. All of these, I feel, are very much were HAARP generated, and were experimental to just see how to use the toy. And yes, you mentioned the word genetics a few minutes ago, and yes, I think they will be down to the DNA. I think they want to alter the human. They call it enhance the human, and humanity. In a sense, I was remembering something Rudolf Steiner said, that that the future, the humanity will have to merge with the machine. But the question is, will humanity be ready to moralize the machine? In other words, humanize the machine to serve humanity. Well, in a way, isn't that what's happening now? They're bringing it faster than it should come. And their idea is that we will serve the machine. So every time they talk about a cyborg, every time they talk about special forces undergoing, quote, training, unquote, I assume that they're experimenting on all of our armed forces, particularly the teams being sent in this asymmetric warfare that we're so enamored of. And they'll use people in mental institutions, homeless people wandering the street, any population where it can be documented in a Nazi fashion. They will be using that for the sake of a transhumanist enhanced future. Yes.
I totally agree with you on that one. Yeah, it is the wave of the future and the illusion of, but I agree, it is about the machine, but what I'm seeing is people playing God with a little g, using this technology, playing God as the machine itself, but they're inducting people, pulling them into the programs, and then of course trying to mind control them, and if it doesn't work, of course there's a torturous avenue, and I've been through that torturous avenue, which is why I'm referencing this right now, but it's all about the electromagnetic pulse weapons as well, and I'm asking you also about HAARP insofar as deployment of electromagnetic pulse weapons. We know it can weaponize the sky and control and manipulate weather patterns, but what about, let's say, targeting a certain individual remotely? Is that a capability with the HAARP when it's all interconnected across the globe?
Well, I have ideas on that. Billy, did you want to say something to that before I do?
No, go on.
The two chapters that were taken out of the book because it was still too overwhelming enough. In there, I begin to build the case for how it could be done in a neighborhood. I talk about the phased arrays. I talk about the transmitters, about the fiber optic cable underground, about the 60 hertz electric sockets in people's houses. And that now I will take those two chapters, and with Billy's help, now that I can see the bigger picture of the space fence itself, then I will look at that. I have definitely been in touch with TIs, targeted individuals. I have listened to them. I have read their reports. I have gotten a real sense of how the satellites and the phased arrays work together, and how even the NexRads could be used if they were close enough. So, yes, I see the targeting happening through a triangulating.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, of various methods, some of them briefcase size, It doesn't anymore, though, have to do with next door neighbor type thing through the wall. It appears that there may be the ability to create a plasma, perhaps even to withdraw a plasma from the human body with the right kind of heat, laser heat. So all these things I need to really study and go more deeply into before I say pat answers. Billy, how about you?
Well, let's include IR pulses, light pulses. Even your TV utilizes remote control. Remote control pulses just from the IR can isolate and excite these nanoparticles that we've been talking about. In doing so, it wakes them up. And in doing so, they also wink back to your TV, to your Wi-Fi, to your anything that's IR.
Right. They're interactive.
Yes. And Solaris, Billy's right. This is the new element that we can add to something that we used to talk about back in the 90s, is the fact that we have ingested these conductive metals, microprocessors, sensors, and these little biological hybrids that can be remotely accessed. This is putting the idea of mind control on a whole new level.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Plus the electromagnetic field, and if you're a spiritual being and you expand your aura and your electromagnetic field, then of course I would suspect that would be more easy to target as well, because it's energy any way you look at it.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because I'm not sure about that. I know that consciousness has a tremendous force, and I have actually heard from two people that consciousness is a very protective agent, and that it's possible that with the more conscious people, I don't know about being astrally available out of your body and that sort of thing. I would think that would be very vulnerable. But consciousness within the body, in a strong, you could call it a spiritual way, I think would be, those people might not be as easily accessed, would be my guess. And that is what I've heard. But I don't know quite what I'll do with that in the next book.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, I have a different scenario with that, but that's good. There was something else I was going to ask you. You guys mentioned briefly in the beginning the 7 agendas, military in nature. Did we cover those at all?
No, I can do that very quickly. I always keep my list handy, because a lot of people know that weather is one of the agendas, and then they know that other people know that mind control must be one of the agendas. But there are others. So let me run through those quickly. Weather environmental modification is the first operation, and we can see that all the time. You see it now with the strange snowballs in Lake Michigan, etc. Weather modification has to do with the present definition of asymmetric warfare. The warfare now being pursued, besides special forces, SWAT teams sort of thing, is political and economic warfare. And you can imagine that being able to modify the weather could be very useful for political blackmail. Could definitely get nations to do what you want, or else. One that I think of right away is when we when I say we, I assume it was the U.S. redirected the rain that was intended for Iran and sent it down to England to flood the streets, leaving Iran in a 2-year drought. So then there's also the economic warfare, which would be some people making a lot of money off of weather warfare, through insider trading and weather derivatives and assurance companies and that sort of thing, just being an insider compared to those on the outside. So then the second operation is electromagnetic operations, whereby, as you can see, they're still experimenting, drawing charged particles from the upper atmosphere into our lower atmosphere, spreading barium and aluminum and other heavy metals, particulates to increase the conductivity of the lower atmosphere for 24/7 use. From all the way from, whatever they choose to do. The third would be military operations. Right. And that would be refueling low orbiting platforms and space operations, like what we're talking about here, the space-based scalar space fence, which is replacing the old ground-based missile defense system. Military operations would be drones, the control of drones, being able to have the air electrified enough, like a battery, that we could send a drone at any point in time and make it do what we wish, and as many drones as we want, that sort of thing. So then the fourth would be biological chemical operations, and the biotechnical delivery of biowarfare components, all on a nano scale. And this would be all the way from, as I've said, the cross-domain bacteria to Ebola. If you wanted to deliver Ebola, you would simply need the frequency and the pulse. And then to control human behavior, not through mind control, but through the control of the endocrine system, for example, or the control of the potassium or whatever we need. In this way, I think they're very interested in doing this. And one of the things right away I think of is, imagine that they could rearrange the chemical composition of, say it was potassium or anything, and then hit us with a pulse that would make everyone very tired or everyone very angry. And I really thought of this when the thing happened in Ferguson, when suddenly the crowd was infuriated, and it seemed to spark overnight. That was like a couple months ago. So I often wonder about that, about the frequency and the pulse, because once you have an ionized atmosphere and it would be maybe a different composition over different areas for the sake of the experiment of the day. And then populations could be controlled in that way. Then the fifth one is planetary geophysical operations. That would be Earth changes in the troposphere and magnetosphere. And it could even be what I think some people call terraforming, though I don't think of it as an alien thing. I think of it as changing the composition or the shape of various places. And right away, I think of New Orleans after Katrina, when I think it was 30-some thousand people were moved out, never to see their home again, most of them, and their properties bought up for a song. And then the restructuring of that international port. And then I thought it was very interesting that the next big one in the United States was Sandy, because then they were able to do the same thing there at the ports of New York and New Jersey, move people out and restructure that international port. So that idea of, Earth changes on a natural scale, and then Earth changes through fracking, hydraulic fracking, tomography. They're zapping, various places on the Earth with tomographic microwaves, and there are earthquakes that follow, and sinkholes collapse, salt domes collapse. It seems to me that they're interested in that in certain areas of the country. Okay, then the sixth is intelligence and surveillance, which Billy has addressed for the sake of C4, what the military calls C4, command, control, communications, and computers. That would include virtual warfare, having Jesus and Mary in the sky over a Catholic country, Allah over a Muslim country, alien ships flying in to attack us. That virtual is the holography capability is extraordinary. Yep. And then that would also include the mind control, the intelligence surveillance. in which you would then have the brain frequencies, you would have the emotion frequencies, and you could manipulate large populations or individual. It really wouldn't matter if you had the right technology nearby. Then the seventh operation is most interesting to me because it won't be far out to you, but it would be to some people. The detection of exotic propulsion systems, or the obscuring of exotic propulsion systems. And when I say exotic propulsion systems, I am assuming, which I do believe, and I believe I can substantiate it, it'll be in the next book, that we have had electromagnetic disks since the Operation Paperclip, when we brought all the Nazi engineers in. And we have our own. And then there are the possibility of other parallel dimensions and various crafts that are not particularly physical, but perhaps made of plasma in coming into this this dimension. So that seventh is it's very fascinating to me, and I'm going to have to proceed carefully because, as my publisher said, once you mention UFOs, you're dead.
Oh boy. Well, it does correlate. It all ties in on a very complex level. But you're looking at a holographic. If you want to go the angle of a holographic universe and the holographic mind, then you can see how accessible this technology is to interact as part man, part machine. It's just very compatible on that level, if you ask me. So that's what I'm thinking. Also, is that these guys are really knowing. They're almost mastering this whole thing. They're quite expanded insofar as being able to pull this off, if you ask me.
Well, yeah, they've always been about 50 years ahead. I plan to do a bit of history in the book of going back to I talked about Tesla in this book, but I want to talk about I think his name is E.T. Whittaker.